It seems like every time I turn around, there's a new emulator handheld on the market. Normally, these devices wouldn't really intrigue me because I already have a Steam Deck and that can emulate all of the games that I want. And why would I want a dedicated handheld that can run games probably not as well as my Steam Deck could? And honestly, a lot of these handhelds can't run some of the games that my Steam Deck can. Well, Anbernic sent me this device for review purposes, and spoiler warning, I like this thing a lot. Some of my preconceptions were true, but there's a lot to like here. And if you're intimidated by emulation or have never used an emulator before, then I think this one might be one worth getting. This is the Anbernic RG35XXSP. Not the most memorable name. It's a little handheld emulator that, design-wise, is clearly inspired by the Game Boy Advance SP. It's got a D-pad, start, select, a little menu button where the old SP backlight button used to be, 4 face buttons, and 4 shoulder buttons on the back that surprisingly aren't as clunky feeling as I thought they would be. It has an HDMI output in case you want to have it on a big screen, and it also has a headphone jack, which is always nice to have. Holding it in the hand feels very reminiscent of the original SP. I also like the display on this thing, especially the sort of scan line filter that it has on this thing by default. I think it's really solid. A lot of times I find that filter to be a little bit distracting with different emulators, but whatever they have in place on this one, I think it's really solid, and I've kept it on because it really reminds me of like the old Game Boy screens, and I think it's really good. And speaking of which, if you're playing a Game Boy or a Game Boy Advance ROM, it has this really nice little overlay that, I don't know, it's just a nice little extra touch. It looks clean, and it kind of just sells the illusion that you're playing a Game Boy again. For me, the system arrived with a bunch of ROMs already preloaded on the system. Not sure if that's what you're gonna have with your order if you get this thing, but it's worth mentioning. When you boot up the system, it has its own game room front end that you can use to access all of your ROMs, but it also has RetroArch, which performs better, in my opinion, looks better, and is better organized, and yeah, just use that instead. The RG35XXSP, not gonna be calling it that again, is pretty much good for emulating systems in the 5th generation or up to the 5th generation of consoles. This means you can play N64, Saturn, PS1 era games, all with ease. It can also handle Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, DS, and even PSP games just fine. Dreamcast emulation also works pretty darn well on this thing too, but don't expect anything else from that console generation to work. Now, on paper, this is sort of just an entry-level little emulator handheld, but honestly, this thing's got a lot going for it, and it's kind of won me over since having this thing. With something this portable and an easy-to-use interface, I find myself using this a lot more than expected. If you've never dealt with emulators before, this is a fantastic entry point. Anbernic also includes a primary microSD card for the RG35, and the file structure makes sliding in new ROMs super easy. You basically just find the system you want to add your files to, and there you go. It even has an expansion slot too, so you can easily build up a massive library of games for this little thing. Now, this device isn't perfect. Its lack of an analog stick, for example, makes playing certain games a challenge, if not impossible for others. Its lack of a touchscreen can also make some DS titles a little clunky to control, and like I said, it's basically limited to play up to the 5th generation of consoles in terms of horsepower. So if you were wanting to emulate some PS2 or GameCube games, then I'm sorry, this just isn't the device for you. But again, this is still a very versatile and convenient system that I play again and again. Its good battery life and hyper portability really makes this an excellent travel companion. Now, I love my Steam Deck, don't get me wrong, it's still my primary handheld of choice, especially when playing emulated games. But there's just something nice about having something super portable that you can fold up, put in your pocket, put in a bag, and not have to worry about damaging the screen or anything like that. Something that's small and discreet so you don't feel weird if you don't like playing on a big Steam Deck in public. And yeah, it saves a lot in the travel bag, it's great for car rides, and yeah, the more I use this thing, the more and more I find myself liking it. If you're an experienced emulation user who is looking for something super powerful, I think you'll only really like this device if you have a specific use case in mind or if you really like to tinker. But if you're new to emulation, or if you're like me who just wants something super convenient to use, then the RG35XXSP, while it has a dumb name, the system itself is super charming and is a definite fun addition to anyone's gaming collection. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this little Anbernic handheld device. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on something like this. If you're someone who plays a lot of emulated stuff, let me know what your primary device is for playing said games. And also, if there's anything that I didn't talk about on this device that you have questions about, please let me know in the comments down below. I'll try my best to answer all that I can. But yeah, that's enough rambling out of me. Be sure to like this video if you liked it, disliked if you didn't. Thanks again so much for watching this video, and until next time, y'all have a good one.